Hello, beautiful people.
And welcome to Ask Zajef number 10. Hi. As usual, we're taking questions from Twitch chat. If you want to have your question answered on Ask Zajef, keep an eye out for the community posts. I try to make one every time I end up recording this on Twitch at twitch.tv/Zajef77. But let's get into it. How many times does Tighnari's charge attack level 2 and burst actually apply Dendro? Tighnari applies Dendro on his initial charge attack shot and then once over his 4 wreath arrows. So 2 times per charge shot. And I think from what I understand, if you have C6, it just adds 1, but it doesn't fucking matter, it's C6, right? So it's 2 times per charge shot and 4 times from the burst. Is Slingshot the best free-to-play bow for Tighnari? Yes, and Tighnari doesn't have a good free-to-play bow. What I mean by that isn't that, like, you need to pull the 5-star for him, not at all. Like, basically what I mean is, he doesn't have a free-to-play bow, or a 4-star bow, that's, like, very much focused on what he does, right? He doesn't have, like, the catch for Xiangling. He doesn't have, like, Sac Frag for Taser Sucrose. He doesn't have that one weapon that just is far above the others for the 4 stars. Basically, all of his 4-star options, or free-to-play options, are just similar. Stringless is a good option. Prototype Crescent, if you can hit the weak point, is actually going to be a very good option. If not, it's worse than the other choices, so, like, do you want to go for that? It depends. How often are you going to be against enemies that have weak points? It's up to you. He just doesn't have any, like, insane weapons. So you can just go with whatever you have, honestly. In Hyper Bloom teams, which Electro unit is preferable if I want an animal unit to be the one to trigger the Hyper Bloom? I don't have Kugi, so I can't put EM on my Electro unit. Kugi is not the only one who can do it. Yelan can do it, Raiden can do it, but if you want to have an animal trigger, your best bet if you're an AoE is Beidou, because Beidou will not hit the seeds with her burst procs. So all of your procs will be coming from your animal unit. But if you're in single target, Beidou doesn't work because her Electro application is dependent on how many times her burst hits. And if you're in single target, her burst only hits once, which slows down her Electro application to the point where it can be difficult to have an Electro aura to swirl onto the seeds. So you'll end up just not triggering all of your seeds. If you're in single target, you generally got better off with Fischl. Now, Fischl can actually hit the seeds sometimes, which means that some of your seeds are going to be yoinked by Fischl, but not all of them. So it would generally be either Fischl or Beidou. Yelan or Xingqiu for Dendro? I would say that in basically every situation, Xingqiu's better. That won't necessarily always be the case, though. I can very much see a situation where eventually we start getting more specialized Dendro units, where you want to have a specific amount of Hydro application to trigger blooms, but you don't want to have too much. And right now, that's the case, right? It's just that the amount of Dendro application we want is like once every 3 seconds, which obviously Yelan applies way more than that. Right, so basically what ends up happening is, here's how Xingqiu's Hydro application ends up working out. So you get Xingqiu to hit with Hydro, with his burst, right? So his wave 1 applies Hydro, 1 unit. Wave 2 applies 1 unit, and if you have C6, wave 3 applies 2 times 1 unit. But while this is going on, every 2.25 seconds, his orbitals are also going to apply Hydro. So how does this end up working out? Well, what ends up happening is, it takes generally a little bit more than 1 second to get your waves to come out. So what's going to happen is you'll have wave 1, or cast, right, on your burst, you get 1U Hydro, and the Rain Swords and shit. Then you get wave 1, you get 1U Hydro, and then wave 2 is basically going to be when the ICD lines up for the orbitals. So you'll get 1U Hydro from that, plus 1U from the wave, 2 times 1U Hydro. Let's just not write Hydro, because it's always going to be Hydro. Then wave 3, well, that's where the C6 happens, so you get 2 times 1U again. Then wave 4, then, well, the ICD for this happens, so you end up getting the orbital hit and the wave hit, which is another 2 times 1U. Wave 5, you get 1U, and then wave 6, you get the C6, and you get the orbital, so it's 3 times 1U. Basically, right, what ends up happening is, on average, Xingqiu applies a fuck ton of Hydro. That's basically what you need to know, right? In Yelan's case, you got your cast, that's 2U instead of 1, but after that, it's just always 1U. As you can see, right, Xingqiu's application is a lot faster, but also somewhat inconsistent in the sense that, like, it's not always the same amount because of the orbitals and because of the C6. But Yelan, it is consistent. So, there could be a situation where you want to make sure that you want to keep a Dendro aura, because as I talked about in some of the previous videos, but we can still talk about a little bit here, when you apply Dendro on Hydro, you'll only be able to get one bloom, basically. Right? It removes the aura. But if you do the other way, if you do it the other way around, and you apply Hydro on Dendro, you can actually get 2 seeds, right? Which means that you can generate more seeds with the Hydro and Dendro side than Dendro on the Hydro side. Obviously, if you're using an Electro unit, you can actually use the Electro charge trick that I talked about in my Xingqiu video, which you can check out. But basically, assuming you want to stick to blooms and not hyper blooms, which is going to be the case for Nilo, because Nilo has a passive that tells you that if you're running Electro units, her passives don't work. Effectively, right? You're incentivized to run only Dendro and Hydro units. But if you run Dendro and Hydro units, you'll get more seeds generated if you do Hydro on Dendro than if you do Dendro on Hydro. But the thing with Xingqiu is if he applies 3 times 1 unit, then he's gonna wipe the Dendro and apply Hydro, which means that you might actually end up with a Hydro aura, and that's gonna reduce the amount of seeds that you can generate. So, if we ever get very, very fast Dendro that synergizes in bloom teams, or you just want to generate bloom seeds and have them just explode with someone like Nilo, then that could be a situation where Yelan could be more valuable than Xingqiu. All that being said though, right now we don't have any of that, and so right now, Xingqiu is just infinitely more valuable than Yelan in every Dendro team. What are the chances Cyno can battery Beidou with E-spam with TF? I mean, 100%, it's gonna work. The question is how much does he battery her, because putting a battery on your team doesn't mean that you don't need to run any ER, right? It just means that you need to run less. And then it's possible that you're such a good battery that you don't need to run any. In Cyno plus Beidou's case, that will not be it. So generally what I've been looking at for Cyno is rotations that seem to be around 22 seconds. So you'll generally get about 4 procs of Electro Resonance. So let's look at elemental particles caught, non-caught. So basically, right, when you generate elemental particles, based on whether or not it's the same element as your character and whether or not your character is on field, you'll always gain energy, but the amount of energy that you gain will be different. Energy generated is 3 for an electro particle that is caught, 1.8 for an electro particle that is not caught, 1 for a non-electro particle that is caught, 0.6 for a non-electro particle that is not caught, and 2, and then 1.2. So, we can take a look at Beidou. Beidou is generally going to catch 1 parry in these teams. So then, whether or not you get your perfect parry, that's going to affect how many she catches. Let's say you miss your perfect parry and you only get the 2 particles. Now, the amount of electro particles that are not going to be caught is actually going to be pretty big. You should generally get the first Electro Resonance proc on Beidou as well. So you get 3 from the rest of the Electro Resonance. Then what? Well, you get Cyno's particles. But how many particles is Cyno generating? 3 from his E outside of his burst, and from what I've looked at, it seems like you always want to start with EQ. So you get 3, and then 1.3, 4/3. How many times does he use E inside of his burst? Well, with Thundering Fury, it's looking like you can get, I believe it's 7, and without Thundering Fury, it's 3, or it's 4. Now, non-Electro, well, let's say you're running Kazuha and Dendro main character. Beidou's not catching any of their particles, but you're gonna get 2.5 from Dendro MC and 3. You can probably do a holdie on Kazuha, right? So 4. And then clear particles, she's probably not gonna be catching any. Enemies should drop about 2 per rotation, and then you should probably be running a Fav weapon on your Dendro main character. You can run a Fav on Kazuha as well. We're gonna start with only on Dendro main character, so that's another 3. So before energy recharge, that leaves you with a total of 46.5 energy. Her burst cost is 80, so you would need around 172 energy recharge. If you get a perfect parry, on the other hand, this goes up to 5, and instead you only need 152. If you get a perfect parry and end up running a double Fav weapon, it goes down to 142. But yeah, so the amount of energy recharge that Beidou is going to need in Cyno teams is basically going to depend on whether or not you get your perfect parry, whether or not you're running TF. We can look at without TF. Without TF, what you end up losing out on is you end up losing out on 3 E's. So without TF, you generally are going to need about 20 to 30%. It depends on a lot of factors, basically. Is a new gacha sword best in slot for Kazuha? Kinda, yeah. It's a very good sword for him. I also find it really fucking cringe. Better than Freedom? Kinda. Yeah, it depends on whether or not you can take advantage of the like normal charge plunge attack bonus that Freedom gives you. Is it worth pulling as free to play? Fuck no. Never, ever, ever pull for a 4-star weapon on a weapon banner as a free to play player. Because there's no hard pity on it. Unless you like all 5 of the weapons, or like at the very fucking least 4, never roll on a weapon banner for the 4-star weapons. Like, okay, let's take a look at the odds of getting the weapon. And this is going to be very simplified and not perfectly accurate. There's a lot of approximations here. Just trying to give a general idea. So once every about 7 wishes, you'll have a 75% chance of getting this. 75% chance to be 1, 25% chance to be 2. So it's actually an 80% chance consolidated over multiple wishes, right? So 80% of the 4-star weapons you get, or of the 4-star pulls you get, are gonna be the banner ones. And then 20% of that, so 1/5 of that, is gonna be the one you want. So the odds that a given 4-star is the one you want is 80% divided by 5. About 16% actually. So let's say I decide to dump my 40,000 Primo Gems into this banner. So 40,000 divided by 160. I get 250 wishes. I can guarantee a Hunter's Path, but I'm gonna get about 36 4-stars. And the odds that I just don't get the one I want are... There's still a 0.2% chance that I just don't get it. Now, at 0.2, you might think, okay, well, that's still fine, right? But keep in mind, that's 1 in 500, right? If you do 100 wishes, there's a solid fucking 7% chance you don't get it. Just keep in mind, there is no hard pity, and it is very possible that you'll end up needing more fucking wishes to get the specific 4-star you want than a specific 5-star you want. When you're wishing for weapons on the weapon banner, keep that in mind. Just because it's a 4-star, what that means is you're more likely to get a 4-star. It doesn't mean that you're more likely to get the 4-star you want. And it's actually like the average amount of pulls it's gonna take to get a 4-star is lower than a given 5-star, but the variance is a lot higher because you have a lot more options, right? You get a rate up, you only have 2 here, but you have 5 here. Point being, I would never ever recommend wishing for a specific 4-star weapon on the weapon banner. I think it's a very, very bad idea, and you don't fucking want that. If the 5-star weapons are weapons you'd be okay with, then sure, you can consider it. But if they're not, right? I mean, do we know what it's gonna be? Nilo or Cyno's weapon banner? But like, if it's on Nilo's weapon banner, you have a fucking HP % sword, and then I don't know who the fuck they're gonna put with her, but like, Ella. Oh yeah, sure, maybe they rerun Ella, and it's a fucking Song of Broken Pines. And if those are the 5-stars on the fucking Zyphos banner, don't go for it. No matter, it's not fucking worth it, man. Anyways, all of this to say, like, if you think it's a good weapon and the banner as a whole is like good enough for you that even if you don't end up hitting the weapon, you're still okay with wishing on it, then sure. But don't go for the weapon just for that. Please don't. State of Geo as a whole, thoughts, does it need buffs, nerfs, anything in particular I think it needs? Maybe new reactions or a rework of the ass reaction it has now. I think Geo's in a completely fine spot. Like, yeah, Geo's generally considered by people to be the worst element in the game, me included. But I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing. One element has to be the worst. It's not like there's no good Geo teams. The biggest issue is just that there's not a lot of good Geo teams. Now the reason why there's not a lot of good Geo teams is because Geo characters are designed to work well with other Geo characters. But that means that in order to have a good Geo team, you need to have multiple good Geo characters. Whereas in order to have a good Vape team, you need to have one good Hydro and one good Pyro, and then one good Animo, and then another one that does something. That's all you need. So you only need to have one good character from each element that works well with the others, which isn't that difficult of a requirement to meet. But with Geo, you need to have all of your Geo units working well together and being good, which is harder. It's more of a restriction. The only like real issue with Geo is the inaccessibility of some of the Geo units, because it feels really bad to be pulling 4 Geo characters when you know that you'll need to pull for like 3 of them to actually make a good Geo team. If you want to make a good Vate team, you pull for Child, you got International. That's a great team, right? You can do it with Sucrose, right? You want to go for a Taser team, you can go Beidou, Fischl, Sucrose, Kokomi, or Yelan, or Ayato, or whatever, right? You've got so many options just from 1 unit, whereas with the Geo units, you need to have like at the very least 2 to make like the actual good options if you want to build like Geo-focused teams. And that wouldn't be a problem if we had a lot of good 4-star Geo units, but we don't. It also wouldn't be that much of a problem if we had a good standard 5-star Geo unit, but we don't have a standard 5-star Geo unit. It's the only element where we don't have one. I think that's a problem in terms of like accessibility to Geo teams. It's not that Geo as an element isn't balanced well, it's that the way that the units have been decided, like who's on standard banner, who's a 4-star, who's a 5-star, kinda fucks Geo because you need to have a lot of Geo units that work well together to make a good Geo team. And right now, the good Geo units are like Goro, who's a 4-star, which is Paul, but who's only ever been on fucking Ito banners. Ito, and Giga Chad Albedo. Now the thing is, Albedo's not that good outside of Geo teams, but also, Geo teams without Albedo aren't that good. So like, the only real reason why you'd want to go for Albedo from a meta perspective is because you want to go for a Geo team. But if you want to make a good Geo team, you're kind of gonna need to also go for like Ito. You can go for Noel and it can be fine, but with the low constellation Goro, it can actually be pretty difficult to just get enough damage to meet the DPS checks. Also, if you don't have C6 Noel, bro. So basically, right, what ends up happening is the good units in Geo teams are Albedo, 5-star unit, Goro, a lot better at high constellation than at low constellation, Noelle, just fucking dog shit if you don't have her C6, Ito, 5-star unit, and then arguably Zhongli, 5-star unit, and that's it. There's no like actual free-to-play friendly Geo units. But then on top of that, on the Geo carries, both of them are Claymore users, right? Both Noelle and Ito are Claymore users. Sure, Y-Blind is a very good weapon, but the difference between Y-Blind and like Serpent Spine is actually pretty noticeable. Because Serpent Spine is such a good weapon. Basically, right, all of this to say that like Geo's a bit less accessible to new and or free-to-play players because it just has so many things that you need to have to make it work. Which in my opinion is somewhat of a problem. And I think that there is a very easy way to fix it, which is put Albedo on standard banner. It would fix both the fact that Geo is somewhat inaccessible, and it would also fix the fact that with Tighnari's release, we're gonna have literally every element except Geo on the standard banner. They can't put him on standard after advertising him as a limited character. Yes, they can. Right? You're saying this because of the above characters, the event exclusive character will not be available in the standard Wish Wanderlust invocation. So all they have to do is make a new standard Wish and call it something other than Wanderlust invocation. Would people get mad if they add Raiden on standard? I think that's kind of different because it's not that I get mad at it, but it would be weird if an Archon was in a standard banner. I wouldn't mind, but it would definitely be weird. Yeah, also they wouldn't do that because Raiden banner prints the money. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like they're never gonna put a character on the standard banner that doesn't feel like you're losing your 50-50 to them. Characters that I could potentially see on the standard banner: Yoimiya, Ella, Albedo, Klee. No cap. Yo, okay. I'm gonna be real with you guys. I think they actually do intend on making Albedo a standard character eventually. Because why the fuck else would they give him these constellations? Oh wow, energy on a character whose burst fucking sucks. Oh wow, a bit of damage on a burst that fucking sucks. Okay. Talon damage constellation. Plunge attack damage.
Bruh.
Oh, a bit of damage percent. 17 damage for. Ooh. Albedo's best constellation by far is his C3. And that should tell you something. Yeah, he actually has standard constellations. Okay, I think that's gonna be it for the Ask Zajef, and it might also be it for the stream for the day. These are the same people who cry about student loans being forgiven. Yeah, actually, that's true.